Coming up, earlier this week I sat down with YouTube's Mr. Brexit, Michael Lambert, to answer many of the questions that have been sent in from our viewers. And to any Truth to Power viewers that submitted questions we didn't quite get to, I'm really sorry, we did have so many questions. So Michael, first question from Neodim. What is your personal experience of current UK to EU trade? And Neodim is interested in real life examples.
Okay, I can give a real life example. Until Brexit, I had a business with about 300 customers all over Europe, in France and Holland, Belgium, Spain. And they were all shops, and we were supplying them perhaps every month, every other month. Very small quantities. It was usually orders of a few hundred euros, not big consignments. And the way it worked was that we would either go there ourselves, or we'd have a salesman who would go around, take the orders from the shops. They would be emailed through to us. We'd send them off with DHL the next day. Within 2 days, they get the stock, and in due course, they'd pay us. The system then changed because as a result of us leaving the EU, whereby to do the same operation now, if we want to send the goods, we have to complete export documentation. In some cases, some of our goods were manufactured abroad, so we need certificates of origin. We then send the goods off, and when the goods arrive, the customer then, instead of receiving the goods, they have to complete, or they have to employ an import agent to complete import documentation. And this involves all sorts of information, including producing the certificates of origin and so on. And also it requires them to pay duty if necessary and VAT on arrival, plus paying the agent's import agent's charges. And customers just say, we can't do this, we're not going to do this. And so my customer base went from 300 to 0 overnight as a result of Brexit. And I'm just one of thousands and thousands and thousands of companies who find now their customers in Europe would rather not deal with us. Well, they won't deal with us, and they'll just find alternative suppliers elsewhere. So in my case, it was absolutely catastrophic, just completely destroyed a business for nothing. And we'd run this business for 20 years. It was really quite a nice, steady business, had huge potential, completely gone. And for anyone who wants to start a business how to export to Europe, forget it, really forget it. Unless you've got an office or premises in Europe, don't bother. It's just too complicated. That's Brexit.
Yeah, for my business, Michael, it's not trade as in trading products or exporting and things, but as you know, I run an actors agency, so I'm providing services to customers within the EU. Some of my biggest customers were the big Hollywood studios shooting big budget movies. That they tended to use Eastern European countries because of cheaper production costs there, but they'd love to actually employ British actors because of the language difficulties and everything, and being able to speak with a reasonable accent. So I used to get a lot of business placing my actors in Eastern European countries for these big Hollywood movies, and also English-speaking theatres throughout Europe. So we have the English Theatre of Hamburg, the English Theatre of Vienna, English Theatre of Frankfurt. These are all opportunities that just disappeared overnight after Brexit. A very good friend of mine who's done a previous video with me, Gordon Griffin, was the casting director at the English Theatre of Hamburg. He's been made redundant because they have to either find English-speaking actors in Germany now, or obviously, it's a Brexit benefit for the Republic of Ireland. A lot of Irish actors are now getting those jobs where English, Scottish and Welsh actors were getting them before.
I was going to say, there is no compensation for this. There's nothing. We get nothing back for this. There's no benefit to us. We're getting a deal to import lamb from New Zealand. I mean, that isn't going to make up for thousands and thousands of firms sending goods to Europe. And of course, firms in Europe who want to send to the UK have the same problem. So trade between the UK and Europe has just really been absolutely decimated. It's really, really terrible. Jen Wyvern 2 says, let's assume that the gig is up and that the new government, more or less to your taste, has been elected with a mandate that allows us to get things done. What announcements of intent, policy and legislation would you want to hear from the new PM on day one?
Would you like me to go through my list? I mean, if they're talking about, obviously, how much can you do literally on day one? But if we're talking about just announcements, what I'd like the new Prime Minister of a new government to be saying, first of all, kill the Police Courts Crimes and Sentencing Bill, which has taken away so many of our democratic rights. Yep. Kill that one. I'd like an announcement to kill the Nationality and Borders Bill, which is breaking international law, and this threat, they say up to 5 million British citizens could be affected, that if they have the rights of nationality in another country, they could have their nationality taken away from them on a whim by the government. Let's kill that one on day one. Kill the expansion of the Official Secrets Act to cover whistleblowers and journalists. Announced legislation to reform the whole electoral system, and while we're at it, replacing the House of Lords. How am I doing so far, Michael?
Doing pretty well, Rob. You could do a whole video on this, I think.
I'd like them to announce a referendum on the Brexit we actually ended up with. And before people say, oh, we've had one referendum, it's a lifetime thing, people didn't know the deal they were voting for. And I think the British population, democratically, should have a vote on the Brexit we've ended up with, because we've not had that vote on the actual Brexit we've got. So let's have a referendum and maybe get a mandate for starting the process of applying to rejoin the European Union, if they'll have us. Next, an announcement that all MPs are banned from all second jobs and directorships. I don't care if it's in the National Health Service or performing a public service. I want my MPs to be absolutely committed to their job as an MP. So that's on day one. I want announcements that we're going to renationalise water, energy and rail. What do you think of that one?
You know, I'm very keen on very, very strong, strict regulation, but I'm not sure I'm absolutely in favour of renationalising. It'd be quite difficult to do.
I was throwing that one out there, you know. So I'd like a new announcement on properly funding the NHS. We know that the funding of the NHS is diminished incredibly much since the Cameron government first came in with Clegg. I want to dismiss all those people, Michael, all those cronies that have been appointed for political reasons to what are meant to be apolitical bodies, like the BBC. You know, we've got Tim Davie as Director General, we've got Richard Frost as the Chairman, we've got Robbie Gibb on the Board of Governors. These are Tories, and it shouldn't be a political board that makes up the PPC. The Arts Council, people are having to resign because they won't sign up to the government's current policies on this, promising not to bring up our days of empire and things like this. It's so political in what should be apolitical appointments, and many other NGAs as well. You know, we had the Ofcom thing recently with the odious Paul Dacre, who thankfully that appointment was stopped, but there'll be somebody else. Dido Harding in charge of the new Public Health Security Agency. You know, these people have got to have their heads rolled. They were appointed for the wrong reasons. Nothing to do with their competence or experience. All about politics. And just to finally, I want to see some of the employment rights that have been rolled back under this Tory government. I'd like them reinstated. You know, the protection rights. You know, the rolling back the gig economy, making 0 hours contracts a thing of the past. I want that all unrolled. You know, this horrible gig economy that we have these days that's creating misery for millions. Let's get those employment rights. The pendulum has got to swing back the other way.
This is your first day in office.
You know, as it is only announcements, maybe we could announce something about levelling up in terms of taxing capital gains tax at the same rate that we're taxing income or worked income. Maybe we could have some announcements that some of these billions of pounds that we need to raise from tax, let's look at taxes after we're dead rather than when we're alive. Let's have a whole look at the inheritance tax side. Oh, it's going to be a busy day one, I can tell you.
I think so. The one you didn't mention is the one that I would be keen on, would be the investigation into all these PPE contracts and so on. I think there's very, very little chance of getting the money back, but I think those who've been involved, if they're dodgy, I think they should be exposed.
We're talking criminal charges, Michael?
I don't know, because I think it's going to be very difficult to prove, isn't it? Because the politicians will argue that it was all being done a matter of urgency and that they didn't have time to put out for tenders and so on. And the people who got the contracts, well, they've gone, they've got the money and they're away, they've supplied the goods, so you can't really do much. But I think they should all be exposed and shamed for it. It's because it's been so disgraceful.
Yeah, I think if there are any charges, it should probably be aimed at the politicians that wave through those contracts rather than the recipients. But I do think perhaps, you know, in terms of, we just mentioned raising taxes, but I mean, I don't see any problem with any some sort of windfall tax for all those contracts that were awarded during the lockdown and for PPE. Let's have some sort of windfall tax on those companies that suddenly went from assets of £200 to 16 million overnight. Let's have some sort of windfall tax on it at least.
Yes, it does seem quite wrong that they should have any chance of getting away with it, but I suspect they all will. Most of them will. Water under the bridge, as they say, and it's still going on, isn't it? I mean, all these testing contracts and all the rest of it. People are making loads and loads of money just because they happen to know somebody.
We had some similar questions, Michael, from Clear Lake, Rafi Madar and Guy Rowe. So I've sort of wrapped them up into one question from those three. Thank you very much. Okay. And by the way, thank you to everybody whose questions we don't manage to get to today. But as Michael will tell you, we've had, what was it, over 100 questions, Michael. We can't possibly cover them all. But Clear Lake, Rafi Madar and Guy Rowe, do you seriously believe that there is even the slightest chance of the UK rejoining the EU within the next 25 years? And is there any chance of a back to EU likely to gain traction? And can you see a roadmap where we can reverse Brexit in the near future?
That's so difficult, isn't it? Because it depends on so many different things, and everything is changing so quickly. We've no idea what's going to happen to the world economy, leave alone the EU economy and the UK economy in the coming years. I mean, who knows what might happen? I would have thought within 25 years it's very likely, but in the short term, I would have thought very unlikely. I'm sure there'll be a lot of movement of people who did vote for Brexit, who will now want to rejoin, in addition to all those of us, the Remainers, who never wanted to leave. And I'm sure there'll be a substantial and growing majority to return. But would they have us? I mean, we've made so much trouble. It's doubtful, isn't it? I think with Macron, very unlikely I can see him doing a General de Gaulle and sitting in front of the camera and saying non.
Well, particularly the way that he's being treated by the current regime in the UK. Certainly, this adversarial...
Yeah. Well, I think we've treated... Yeah, I mean, we treated them all with contempt, really, haven't we? We blamed them for everything. I mean, everything that's gone wrong has been their fault, and the present situation is all their fault. It's never anything that we've done wrong. Yeah. And this whole Article 16 and all the rest of it, it's if I were in the EU, I'm not sure I want us to come back in.
What I found interesting about this question, Michael, is the question was the possibility of rejoining the EU within the next 25 years. Because I think 25 years, I don't know where that figure's come from, but it sounds to me like that's a sort of realistic target, really. It's about the 25-year mark. It's like a generational thing. Although the current polls are saying that the satisfaction with Brexit is about 18% amongst the general population. And only 6% of people that voted leave are very satisfied with Brexit so far. Those figures make you think that you're going to be correct. I think, talk about will of the people. I think the will of the people at the moment is just let's call the whole thing off.
Any right-minded person is going to realise that it's an absolute disaster. Even those who are very keen can see it's a complete and utter disaster, and we'd be much better off had we not left.
I hate to be so sort of fatalistic about this, Michael, and it sounds really crass for me to say so, but also 25 years in the future, the majority of people that voted for Brexit, bearing in mind it's the older people that tended to vote more, the vast majority of Brexit voters will be dead in 25 years. And the youngsters who overwhelmingly voted to remain, they will be in their middle-aged and beyond by that stage. So demographically, there's going to be a pull back towards the EU. I would say it's inevitable that this country will apply to rejoin the EU again. I think the issue is more, the issue is, A, how long will that be? Because demographically, I think it's likely to be about 25 years. And B, as you quite rightly said, are the EU ever going to take us back after what's happened with Brexit? I certainly know for a fact that we'll have far less beneficial terms than we had before Brexit, that's for sure.
Having said that, I think it's very likely that within a very short time we'll be applying to rejoin the customs union and the single market. I think that's almost inevitable within a matter of
I would say as soon as the current regime under Johnson, is out, and that needn't even be a Labour government. It could be a Tory government under some less swivel-eyed Brexiteer than the current cabinet.
This is from Alistair Beckett. Much as I anticipate Johnson's demise, I fear it will exonerate his appalling cabinet. How much damage do you think the current crisis will inflict on the rest of the government?
I'm going to go out on a limb on this one, Michael. I feel that with Johnson's demise, we will see a clean sweep of the broom. I mean, the bookmaker's favourite, I did a video about this on Wednesday this week. Rishi Sunak is the bookmaker's favourite at 5-2.
Yeah.
I think that Johnson has done the Trump trick. I think he has surrounded himself with mediocrity. You know, if you look at the Dominic Raabs, the Priti
Yeah.
Patels, the Liz Trusses, I don't care what university they went to, but none of them are very bright. You know, they are mediocre people. And Rishi Sunak coming in, I mean, I will say, I'm no Rishi Sunak fan. I think he's an appalling multi-billionaire who has got no idea how ordinary people live their lives. But I don't think he's going to want mediocre people around. I think that if it is a Rishi Sunak prime ministership, he will clear out that cabinet. You will see a totally new cabinet. So exoneration, maybe in terms of going back to the criminal charges, yeah, I can't see any of that happening under Sunak, but I do think there will be a major change of personnel. I think Sunak would actually probably bring in competent people.
Looking at the current crop of backbenchers in the Tory party, I mean, you'd have a job to find a credible cabinet, I think, out of any of them. I mean, there's just so few talents there, it seems to me. Anyway.
And of course, Sunak is a genuine Brexiteer from the beginning, unlike some of these turncoats like Liz Truss, the opportunistic ones, or Boris Johnson himself that's gone for, avid Remainer to Brexiteer. Sunak has been consistent. He's always been a Brexiteer for the same reason that most other billionaires are Brexiteers, because they want protection for their offshore funds. They don't want to be covered by EU taxation regulations. So he would only bring in swivel-eyed Brexiteers in that cabinet. So in some ways, I'm not saying it would be a more conducive cabinet in terms of the well-being of the country, but I do think he would have far more competent people than your Raabs, Trusses, Rees-Moggs and Patels. You know?
Yes, I think they're all tainted by what's particularly what's gone on lately, but with the whole history of this government has tainted them, really, because who's going to want to walk away with any pride saying I was part of the Johnson government that caused all this massive damage? I don't think they'll be queuing up to employ them in the city in the way that traditionally cabinet ministers were employed, or in big consultancy jobs and so on. And of course, to have been elected last time, you had to say you were pro-Brexit. So either you were pro-Brexit, in which case you're crazy, or else you had to lie, to pretend you changed your mind. And that, as you say just now, I mean, half the cabinet voted Remain. And so all of those people who are pushing forward with what wonderful deals we're doing and all the rest of it are all people who don't believe in it. And they must, I would have thought, having campaigned for Remain, when they now see it all falling apart and all the damages it's doing, I mean, what can they say?
I mean, the latest statistics on the economy and on trade volumes after Brexit are just so damning. Yeah. There's no argument anymore that Brexit has severely hurt this economy. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Those are statistics from the government itself, the Office of National Statistics.
And I think that sort of bad news is just going to go on all next year. It's going to get worse and worse, I think, for quite a long time. You can't see where the recovery is coming from, where we're going to get this extra business that we've lost with the EU. So.
And any replacement trade will come from literally the other side of the world and will be nowhere near as lucrative or as beneficial to our economy as those from trading with neighbours.
I think with every day, with every week, you think it's even more mad than you thought last week. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy.
James C, K2288, Ethan Christopher Hartley and Dash 8 all ask similar questions, Michael, which is basically, who would you like to see replace Johnson if he's ousted by his party? Who do you think will replace him? And do you think the Tories will be as popular at the ballot box without Boris Johnson?
Okay, the first part is regards who's going to replace him. I mean, it's difficult to know, isn't it? It's absolutely fascinating. I think obviously Sunak is going to be a favourite, I think. As we know, the procedure is that the Tory MPs vote for two candidates, or the best two candidates go forward, and then all the members of the Tory party throughout the country, 130,000 of them, they vote to elect between the two front runners. I think Michael Gove's been keeping very quiet. I think he's probably not going to be too secure because of his connection with these PPE contracts. Otherwise, you get names like Liz Truss. I mean, who would ever think that Liz Truss might be a competent Prime Minister? or Patel. I mean,
Well,
it's just-
whenever I see either Truss or Patel interview,
My-
they don't manage to get to an end of an interview without looking absolutely vacuous with no answers. It's embarrassing
Yeah,
to see either
yeah.
of them interviewed.
I mean, if you met Liz Truss, I think, and you didn't know who she was, what she didn't, and you were asked what do you think she does, you just sort of say a shop assistant, wouldn't you? I mean, she's just got no gravitas, no charisma, no charm, just a.
And let's not forget, she started her political career as a Liberal Democrat as well. So I think she's got so many skeletons in the closet.
And she's also a very strong Remainer. I mean, she was out campaigning all over the place for Remain, doing television documentaries and all sorts. So I don't see her ever being elected. The one I would like to see, who I think is a dark horse, is Jeremy Hunt. I think he might just surprise everybody.
And of course, he was the alternative to Boris Johnson during the last Tory leadership. He was the one of the two, Johnson and Hunt. But the thing is, it's the parliamentary party, the MPs actually vote for those top two. But of course, the current intake, as you say, they've all sworn allegiance to Brexit in order to stand on the Tory ticket this time. So I don't know where Jeremy Hunt's electorate's going to come from, Michael. Because he's very much aligned to the Remainer camp, isn't he? So I'd love to see. I mean, I would get murdered by my followers on YouTube if I endorsed any Tory. But and I get told off for using the term sensible Tory from time to time. But for me, Jeremy Hunt is a sensible Tory. He's still a Tory. Anybody that's listening, I'm not approving of him. Yes. But would I choose Jeremy Hunt over Boris Johnson? Yes. Would I choose Jeremy Hunt ahead of Rishi Sunak? Yes, I would. It's all matters of degree. So I agree with you. I'd love to see Jeremy Hunt, bearing in mind, this is the Tory party we're talking about. But I don't see it, to be honest.
I think if the Tory backbenchers were smart, and they're obviously not, they would choose someone like that, because he can then quite easily start reversing so much of the damage that Johnson has done and blame Johnson for everything that's gone wrong. But whereas I think some of the others, Sunak is so involved in everything that's happened, it's a bit difficult for him to come in and really change course dramatically. So I think that would be the advantage of Jeremy Hunt.
Is Gove very popular within the parliamentary party?
I don't think he is, actually. I think he's very clever. He's very smart. He's terrific,
for sure.
Speaker and so on. But I wouldn't trust him an inch. And no, I don't think. I think he's considered a bit dodgy. I think. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe he's considered a bit. I don't know.
I know amongst the polls of. I know amongst the polls of Conservative voters, there was a Conservative Home magazine. Is that a magazine? Conservative Home did a recent survey, and Liz Truss came out well on top with the approval ratings right up at the top.
I saw that.
So,
yeah.
So
I've
got
a lot of the Tory members in the Shires might well vote for her.
Yeah.
Sort of a nice,
and then as a lot of the comments on my channel say, Michael, if the Tory membership who get to choose between the two selected candidates from the parliamentary party, if they get a choice between Rishi Sunak and somebody with let's say a paler skin of either sex, who are they more likely to go for? Because there's a lot of my followers that would suggest that Tory membership are not quite ready for an Asian Prime Minister.
Yes.
I don't know how true that is, but
I think it might well be. Hocko90 says, like with packing the courts with Conservative judges in America, will the long-term damage already have been done to our democracy with the eventual ousting of Johnson?
Yeah, it's after British politics, my next interest in life is American politics, and it's really quite scary, some of the attacks on democracy that the Republican Party are carrying out at the moment, just putting political appointments into what should be, I think, apolitical positions, like the judges at every level, and even down to things like the returning officers who are counting the next vote in the next election. So they're obviously sort of setting up to sort of subvert the will of the people, to coin a phrase.
Yeah.
But you do see the same thing happening in the UK as well. If you look at the BBC's Board of Governors, we've got an ex-Tory councillor as Director General, Tim Davey. We've got Richard Frost, who was a political appointment as the chairman. Robbie Gibb, ex-advisor to David Cameron, who's now a governor on the BBC board. Things like the Arts Council. There are people having to swear allegiance to government policy and promised not to talk about the days of empire and things like that.
Yes.
And Ofcom recently, we had the government trying to insert the odious ex-Daily Mail editor Paul Dacre, which was thwarted, thankfully. And then the new UK Health Security Agency, which took the place of Public Health England. Dido Harding has been appointed as the head, and she's got no experience.
Incredible.
Especially after, the absolutely ridiculous £37 billion budget spaffed on test and trace. Oh, crazy. And, the Good Law Project at the moment are taking a legal case against the government saying that appointment was illegal.
Really?
It wasn't done. It wasn't done. There were no competitors. She was done sort of on a nod with no experience, no qualifications for that role.
Yeah.
But if you'd like to argue that it's actually corruption, that appointment, then, good luck appointing the government's anti-corruption czar, because it's John Penrose, her husband. So,
can make it up. It's just so blatant, isn't it? It's ridiculous.
How much of that can be undone, Michael? Once Johnson's in the past, how much do you think can be undone of that?
It's going to be difficult, isn't it? I mean, once you've appointed somebody, you can't really, unless you've got good reason, you can't unappoint them. That would be political. So I don't know. You just wait for them to run their term, I suppose. I don't know. It's a tricky one. That it's like these Supreme Court judges in America. Once they're appointed, they're there for life. But obviously, these other appointments are not for life, but they're there for a certain period, I'm sure. So it's difficult. Difficult.
Yeah. Paul Murray says, I'd like to hear your ideas on the steps that Starmer ought to take to exploit the opening he's been given. Well, short of calling for Johnson to resign.
Well, he's been given so many openings all along, hasn't he? And I think we've all been a bit disappointed that he hasn't been more aggressive, or that he hasn't been more on the attack. But I think, in a way, he might have just been playing a clever game, because the Tories are just destroying themselves. I mean, all these scandals. And I think what has been very nice to see lately has been how Starmer has sort of grown in confidence. Not so much confidence, he doesn't like that, but he's become much more assertive. And I love the way that in PMQs he's laughing at Johnson. He knows he's got the upper hand in PMQs. I think also he's built himself. He left a certain amount of time before he had to clean out of his front row, and I think now he's building himself a really quite a credible front bench. I think Yvette Cooper and Wes Streeting and David Lammy, between them, are really formidable characters. Any one of those.
And I'd add Rachel Reeve to that list as well.
Yes. No, I mean they are first class people, I think, and so I think he's just playing it steady, and he's just letting the Tories fall to pieces. I mean, he probably realised all along that sooner or later the Brexit will bring them all down, but that might be what his strategy has been. If it has been, then he's done well. He's doing well.
I mean, I've not been backwards in coming forward with my criticism of Starmer. But I have to say, the last week or two, I think he's really upped his game.
Yes.
And this question asks, mentions him, he's falling short of calling for Johnson to resign. But my question would be, well, to be fair, why would he do that? I mean, Johnson is inflicting so much self-inflicted damage at the moment, both on himself and on his party. I'd imagine that Keir Starmer would be delighted if Boris Johnson stays on, because at the moment, as you say, he's definitely got the upper hand. He destroyed Johnson at Prime Minister's Questions again this week. And as long as that continues, every week that goes by, there's more harm being done to the Tory party. So I'm sure Starmer would love him to stay.
And I think there are now plenty of Tories, and an increasing number of Tories, who are actually calling for Johnson to resign, such as a disappointment with him. But,
and it's probably worth more coming from a Tory backbencher than it's worth coming from the leader of the opposition. I think Keir Starmer's being quite clever on this one. Yes,
indeed. I have a question from John Coffey, and he says, I'd like to know if there was a risk assessment carried out before the Eat to Help Out subsidised meals scheme. Whose idea was it?
Yes, the Eat Out to Die Out, as they call it. It's said to be responsible for several thousand additional and needless deaths. Whose idea was it? I thought it was... maybe I've sort of taken a simplistic view. I thought it was Rishi Sunak's idea. I mean, it was very much a scheme that put the economy before the public health, I think. And was very much a policy you'd expect to come from the Chancellor of the Exchequer rather than, say, the Health Secretary. Putting business ahead of individual welfare.
I think it must have been Sunak's idea, because he was in that famous thing where he was serving food in that restaurant, wasn't he? Getting it all wrong.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. But I think the dilemma there they had was how much they shut down and how much they allowed to carry on in terms of business and so on. And they were very worried about the hospitality industry. And I think it's the same now, isn't it? Where we've got this ridiculous thing where you're told to stay at home. Work from home now, but at the same time go out and have a party for Christmas. I mean, it's just crazy. But
it makes no sense. Yeah,
it makes no sense, except that they don't want the hospitality industry to completely collapse. When obviously they should be shut down, at least for the time being.
But John Coffey, risk assessment. I don't think there was a risk assessment carried out.
No, sure there wasn't.
No,
sure.
It's about as likely a risk assessment was carried out about the Eat Out to Help Out scheme as there was a risk assessment carried out about the implications of Brexit, I would imagine.
Yeah. I think it's all Johnson's career that determines most things rather than assessments.
Catherine Larkin and Stephen Smith asked similar questions. Basically, the government wishes to punish whistleblowing by up to 14 years in jail, and they're very concerned about the combined and separate effects of the redrafted Official Secrets Act and the Police Crimes Courts and Sentencing Bill.
Yes, I mean this is something we should all be extremely worried about. It's a bit like the privatisation of the National Health Service. It's one of those things that people's eyes generally glaze over. People are not that interested, but these things are going on, and it's really, really serious, because this giving the police and the Home Secretary the powers to stop any demonstrations, and this idea of 14 years for whistleblowing. I mean, it's crazy. Patel says that whistleblowing is tantamount to spying. It's equivalent to spying. And the idea of 14 years, I mean, that's a very, very high sentence. You probably would, depending on the circumstances, you probably wouldn't get 14 years for murder these days. I mean, it's really, really terrible. And they talk about whistleblowing. Well, what about whistleblowers of the past? What about all the MP's expenses scandal? That would have all been subject to anybody publishing that would have been risking going to prison. I mean, it's crazy. It is just this is totalitarian dictatorship. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I'm amazed there hasn't been more fuss about it. But as I say, nobody seems that interested. The public are not that interested. They're much more interested in decorations in Downing Street and parties and Christmas parties than they are about things which affect us all. I mean, the problem when you've got such a huge potential sentence for any offence, I mean, no journalist is going to risk anything. They're going to be so cautious, and so it's a real clamp on the press, clamp down on the press, or gagging of the press, and I think that is very, very serious. And it's
this could be you or I, Michael. If somebody got in touch with us with information from within the civil service or something, and we decided to put it into our next YouTube video, that could be us banged up for 14 years. Exactly.
And would you risk it? You probably wouldn't.
No.
And you certainly think very, very serious about it. You have to be pretty brave and pretty determined to expose something that might be subject to this legislation. It's truly frightening.
And if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.